Listen, all my openings can't be good, okay? Shut up! Shut up! Don't laugh at the opening that I just cut from this video. Terrible. Hey, who's that disembodied voice off screen? Yanto! He's actually in the room. Hey there, everyone. Max here. I just caught a terrible opening from this video. I want to let you know. Shut up! This is an audio log. Why? I'm recording this on Thanksgiving week. And I have a lot of stuff going on this week. And I just didn't have the time to put on the camera and make it all nice and fancy, so I'm just making an audio log. So, let's jump right in. Today I'm going to be talking about the idea of getting better at writing. This is a question that was sent by a very dear viewer named Erasos.
Yay!
Erasos has been a long-time follower, and he also follows my other channel that Kitty and I have called Dango Duo. And he always comments, and he left a question, and I thought, this is not only a great time to tackle this question, but I also really want to give him a hand, so let's go. Before I go on anywhere, though, I want to let you know that the following is merely just my advice, my opinion, and what works for me. Don't take it as gospel. Instead, take it as the ramblings of a silly audio log. So, what was Erasos' question? Well, Erasos was saying that he really wants to be a writer, he really wants to get into the writing, but he finds it difficult, sometimes to the extent of only being able to manage a few paragraphs before, having to call it a day. And I think Erasos made a really good point in his comment, because he was describing that dialogue comes easier to write to him than something like description, or even action, and I super relate to that. That is the truest thing right there. It's almost to the extent that, like, if I'm writing a fighting scene, it will take me, like, almost twice as long to write than description, and even longer than just, like, dialogue. Dialogue comes very fluidly to me. And I think it does to a lot of writers. But at the core of it, we have Erasos' question. How did you just get better at writing? What is my advice for that? What have I done? What is my point of view on this? And that's what we're going to be tackling today. If you're watching this really close to its release, you might have noticed that last week I put out two very important videos. One talking about the flawed idea of thinking that you are not meant to be a writer, and a vlog talking about just making the time to write. And I think it's very timely that Erasos sent me this question, because I feel that without context, I would have probably given out some sort of advice around the lines of, like, well, figure out what's not working out for you, or make the time to write. But I think, in order to tackle this question to the fullest, we have to make an assumption. I'm going to assume that Erasos has everything figured out in his life. I'm going to assume that Erasos has the time, and everything's figured out. There's nothing getting in the way of the writing. It's just sitting down and doing the thing. When the world is perfect, how do you get better at writing? That right there is what we're going to be working on today. I was running through my advice, through my thoughts, and I was thinking, what do I do? What did I do in the past, and what worked for me and what didn't? And I'm going to give you a piece of advice, but hear me out, okay? Let me hold your hand, and we'll make it through this explanation together. I think that for someone who is starting out, or for someone who's just building up the experience, or trying to get into the group, because I do realize that there's a bit of a group to writing, and to the act of moving through description and narration and dialogue and telling the story as it comes to you. It comes very natural to me now, mostly because I've just learned to recognize it, and I've learned to tune the world away and just focus on what needs to happen, me and the blank page. But I realized too that this came after a long while. If you watch my previous video, I was talking about how actually my video on the flawed idea of not being meant to be a writer, and I was talking about how when I first got started, I would spend entire hours trying to do one page, and quite literally big droplets of sweat sliding down my forehead. Literally, I'm not lying to you, because I never done it before, and because I never, and I had read stories and I'd read books and I've done lots of reading, but I never realized until I was there doing it just how difficult it was. So I absolutely relate, and I think this is a completely justified question. How do you move from that point? How do you get better at it? And looking through my own advice, I and what happened to me, and what I took from people around me, what helped me the most, it wasn't that I was taking a creative writing course in college. That it helped that I was in a community with people that were encouraging me. But we're assuming that you are in a perfect world and you have an environment that enables you to do this. What helped me the most was the fact that the class forced me to create a number of words, or to create a work every week. And I know that committing to a big challenge is like the most scary thing, especially when you're having issues just getting a page done. But that's not my advice. My advice is actually to focus on smaller fiction. And hold up, I know. People say, oh, short stories are easier. Short stories are not easier. And it's not the easiness of it that is the point here. The point here is low commitment. Working on something, because in Erso's comment, he was talking about how, he has this idea for a novel, and how, other people are like writing entire chapters in one sitting and like pushing through their novels all the way through completion super fast, and there he is still just, one sentence at a time. And I think that aside from just my second point, which I will touch on in a moment, focusing on smaller works that are low commitment can help you see the entire process and get comfortable with things. Again, it's not that short stories are easier to make, it's that they're lower commitment, and you can sit down, and again, like short fiction can be whatever length you want it to. So you can literally spend 1 week, a few nights in 1 week, working on one particular scene of a short story, or even flash fiction if you want to, just shorter format fiction that is low commitment. You can sit down, you can write it through, and not only go from just completing sections, but go through completing a whole scene and get into the flow of things. I'm not sure if jumping into a novel right away is the best of ideas, especially when you're, I don't want to say getting started, because I mean, like I've known Eros for a while, but it's like getting into the groove of things. I feel that it's the exact same idea, or I feel like this advice makes a lot more sense if you apply it to something like learning to draw or learning to do illustrations. Because you start with very small commitment projects. Just draw one character, just do a bust, just try to do a background, one single thing. You sit down, you try to get it done, and you move forward. Low commitment as opposed to trying to do a whole book of illustrations, or starting a whole comic, or something that requires a lot more investment than just a small little thing. Small projects, small investments. And someone very clever might have pointed out, Max, is that why you write novellas all the time? And part of that is that reason, as a matter of fact. I love novellas because they come naturally to me, but also because they're shorter format, and they allow me to create something in between other projects. Again, short projects are not inherently a bad thing. I personally love novellas, and I would very much rather release 10 novellas in 1 year than just one huge 600-page novel. But that's just how I look at things, and that's really just besides the point. The core of my advice to Erasos and to anyone out there is struggling with putting the words on the page, because I do realize that there are different levels to the people who are reaching out for advice, and there are those who are in the trenches of their first novel. There are those who are in the trenches of their second novel. And there are those who are in the trenches of just getting started. Never get the feeling that because I use the word levels that some people are better than you. Everyone is on the trenches with you. The struggle against the blank page is the exact same. And there comes a reality where, it becomes easier to translate the thoughts into words and put them in the right order. But the mechanical act of that, and the mechanical exhaustion that comes from that doesn't really go away. But that's part of it, though. And I feel part of it is realizing that everyone around you, every person you look up to, every author who has inspired you, every writer that's there in the trenches with you, struggles the exact same way against a blank page, and has struggled the exact same way learning to put the words on the page. And I don't think that this is I don't think this is anything that you cannot overcome. It's really just ultimately a matter of getting used to the flow of writing. And one more thing, because it came to me as I was talking about it and thinking about my own process, and I know this is gonna sound silly, and I know someone out there is gonna think this is funny, but I'm just gonna tell you how I feel and how I do things. When I sit down to write, when I get ready to put words on the page, I simply translate what I am seeing, what I am hearing, and putting it on the page. I feel that when I'm the most effective at writing, the gap between that jump, the abyss narrows between my mind and what I see, and the hand and the pen. And I don't, it's hard, I don't really want to say that, like, I picture a movie and I just write down the movie as it comes to my mind, because it doesn't really feel like that. But I feel, honestly, that aside from the mechanical nature of actually just typing with your fingers and writing with your hand, aside from that mechanical fact, I feel that a lot of it is just picturing things and not second-guessing yourself and not thinking too hard on things. It's just putting them on the page. And I know someone out there is going to think that's weird, and that, like, well, you're going to make terrible writing, but the reality is that it's the first draft. And if you follow me on Twitter, you have seen my comments. Every time I finish a book, every time I go into revision, I'm like, I forgot to describe the room, didn't I? Yup. I forgot to describe... I always forget to describe the main character in Chapter 1. I always forget to do that. I always... I get so built up into things that I always forget, and I always have to add it on later on. But the reality is this. When someone picks up your book and reads it, if you revised it as well as you could, and if you made things work, they will never be able to tell the difference. People who read Masks of Glass probably had no idea that I forgot to describe Claire in the first chapter. And they probably will never realize that I forgot to describe her apartment when it's in the second scene. I think it's in chapter 2. I completely forgot to, because I pictured it in my mind so vividly that I never stopped to question it or to make a note about it. But that was part of the process, though. And if you... Yanto, what are you doing here? Kitty, you want to know where your stupid son is?
Where is he?
He's next to my clothes bin. He's sitting on top of your box. His butt is literally, like, hanging out outside of, like, the closet. Hey there, everyone. Sorry about that. Our cat Yanto. Huh? Hey, Yanto. You want to... Please don't jump into my dirty clothes bin, Yanto. Please. I beg you. Yanto. If you want a mental image for what Yanto looks like, he is a Russian blue. And he is 3 years old and has a big kitten face. And now he is surrounded by coats, and he's like, I want out of here. What was I talking about? I was talking about the process and getting into the flow. I honestly feel that aside from just mechanical skills, such as, learning to type without looking down at the keyboard, and being able to translate your thoughts through your pen into the paper as fast as you can, or as effectively as you can without hurting your hands. I feel like the rest of it, honestly, at least for me over time, became narrowing the gap between my mind and what I saw and the paper itself. Even, you could say, to the detriment of some elements. Yanto, are you biting the box, Yanto? You can totally hear that, can't you? Yanto, stop trying to eat the box.
That's what Diane, Ruby, and Camellia are.
I'm trying to tell the viewers. It's a very important writing advice video, Yanto. Of course, it's the day that I don't have the camera on that he's like, oh yeah, time for me to be on the spotlight. He was meowing earlier because he was just like, pay attention to me. I'm a cat. And now he's happy. I'm scratching the back of his neck and he's happy. Narrowing the gap. You could say my advice is narrow the gap, even to the detriment of the story. And I just told you, like, I forgot to describe those things. And you know what? At the end, it didn't freaking matter. So, I hope this audio log has been insightful. I hope that if anything, I gave you another point of view. To Erasos and to anyone out there who is struggling with learning learning the flow, and to learning to narrow the gap between what they see in their mind's eye and what they put on the page. Keep going. Focus on smaller fiction. Smaller things you can do and complete and see the entire cycle before your eyes. And have completion. Because I feel that nothing tears away at a writer's mental diligence than worrying about that book that they have been working on for years and that they fear they'll never finish. That right there, I feel that destroys so many writers. That fear of never getting back to those unfinished novels. Start small. Not because short stories are easier. They're not. It's the same mechanical work, but rather because they are low commitment. You come in, you can get them done in a week, maybe even less, and you have a thing you can revise, a thing you can look at, a thing you can perfect, and a thing you can share with the world. And before anyone out there tries to tell me that short stories don't matter, there are people out there, people who changed my writing, who wrote nothing but short stories. Jorge Luis Borges comes to mind, one of the fathers of magical realism, Argentinian short storyist who wrote nothing but short stories his entire life, and stories that touch my heart. So, thank you for tagging along. On the screen, you know the usual dealio. I have a Twitter account. I also have a Patreon. This video is here in part because of the following people. If you want to get a shout out in my videos and you want to get to watch my videos early, you can go to my Patreon, link on the screen right now, and pledge $1 and get to watch next week's videos. It's as simple as that. So, thank you for tagging along. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me. Again, sorry for the audio log only. It's Thanksgiving week. I'm running all over the place. And I have this cat here. I'm moving my hands all over the place like I usually would. And he's like, what? What you doing? What are his hands for? Hi, Yanto? Hey, Yanto, can we get a meow? Can we get a meow for the audience? No, you're going to attack me, huh?
Yanto.
No, now he's grooming himself. Hey there, everyone. Thank you for tagging along. And we'll see you on the next one.